The crystalline dome of the outcast colonies fractured the dying sun's light into prismatic shards, casting ever-shifting patterns across Vailitha's iridescent skin. She watched as the patches of violet and azure rippled along her forearms, a telltale sign of emotional disturbance she could never fully suppress. Another design flaw in a long list of failures. Specimen V789 demonstrates continued inability to maintain epidermal stability, she whispered, mimicking the cold clinical tone of her creators. Emotional contamination remains persistent. A bitter smile crossed her face as she traced the luminescent veins that branched beneath her translucent skin, a map of everything they'd tried to make her become, and everything she'd failed to be. The distant sound of emergency sirens pulled her attention to the dome's apex, where an unfamiliar spacecraft was making an erratic descent through Varela 7's toxic atmosphere. Its hull glowed red-hot, leaving a trail of smoke and debris that spelled certain disaster. The vessel was clearly of human design, sleek, primitive, and completely unsuited for the planet's caustic environment. Vailitha's enhanced vision tracked its trajectory with unwanted precision, another gift from her makers. The ship would crash approximately 3 kilometers outside the colony's protective barrier, in the crystalline wastes where even the hardiest of outcasts feared to tread. No one survived out there, not even the mutated scavengers that sometimes ventured beyond the dome. She should turn away. Should retreat deeper into her isolated sector where the other outcasts wouldn't have to see her strange eyes or the way her skin betrayed every emotion. Should let whatever poor souls were aboard that ship meet their fate in the wastelands, just as she had been left to meet hers in exile. But something pulled at her, an echo of the human DNA that had contaminated her genetic sequence. Empathy. Compassion. Weakness, according to the Dominion. Specimen demonstrates continued inappropriate emotional response to external stimuli, she muttered, already moving toward the airlock chamber. Her hands moved instinctively over the environmental suit controls, muscle memory from countless escape attempts in her early days of exile. The suits weren't designed for her hybrid physiology. The synthetic fabric chafed against her hypersensitive skin, and the helmet's filtration system barely processed enough oxygen for her enhanced lung capacity. But it would have to do. As she sealed the final clasp, a familiar tremor ran through her body, the precursor to one of her episodes, as the scientists had clinically labeled them. Moments when her unstable genetic code would spiral into chaos, leaving her racked with pain and bioelectric discharge that could short-circuit any technology within range. Not now, she hissed, forcing herself to breathe through the rising tide of cellular rebellion. Not yet. The airlock cycled, and caustic winds howled against her faceplate. In the distance, the human vessel had carved a burning scar across the crystalline plains, its hull still smoking in the violet haze. She could make out a single figure moving among the wreckage, still alive, but not for long without protection from Varela 7's atmosphere. Vailith began to run, her enhanced muscles propelling her across the treacherous terrain with inhuman speed. Another gift. Another curse. Another reason she'd never belonged anywhere. But maybe, just maybe, that's exactly why she was the only one who could save them. Specimen demonstrates unprecedented autonomous decision-making, she whispered to herself, a shadow of a smile playing across her lips. Outcome unknown. Further observation required. The human was still moving when she reached the crash site. A male, she noted clinically, already showing signs of atmospheric exposure. He turned toward her approach, and even through the caustic haze, she could see his eyes widen at her appearance. She knew what he saw, a tall, ethereal figure in a makeshift environment suit, with skin that shifted like auroral lights and eyes that glowed with bioluminescent intensity. A monster. An aberration. A failure. But when he spoke, his words crackling through his failing comm system, there was no fear in his voice. Only wonder. My God, he breathed. You're perfect. And for the first time in her existence, Vailith felt something new ripple across her skin, hope, shimmering like starlight. Dr. Cole Merrick had spent his career studying the impossible, but nothing in his decades of xenobiological research had prepared him for her. The quarantine bay of the outcast colonies was a stark testament to the Dominion's idea of mercy, sterile, efficient, and devoid of comfort. Yet he couldn't take his eyes off the woman seated across from him, her skin rippling with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. The medical scanner in his hand was giving readings that defied every principle of cellular biology he knew. "Your genetic structure," he murmured, more to himself than to her, "it's not degrading. It's evolving. In real time." A flicker of something, pain, fear, sent a wave of deep purple across her skin. "A flaw in the hybridization process," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that made his chest tighten. "One of many." "No." Cole lowered the scanner, letting himself really look at her. The symmetry of her features blended alien and human characteristics in ways that spoke of artistry rather than accident. Her eyes, with their shifting geometric patterns, tracked his movements with an intelligence that bordered on prescience. "This isn't a flaw. This is an abomination," she finished for him, turning away. "A failed attempt to merge incompatible species." "I know what I am, Dr. Merrick." "Cole," he corrected gently. "And you're wrong. About all of it." He pulled up the holographic display of her cellular structure, expanding it between them. "Look. Your DNA isn't failing to integrate, it's creating entirely new patterns of genetic expression. Patterns I've never seen in any species." Vailitha's eyes narrowed, and the colors beneath her skin accelerated their dance. "The Dominion's greatest scientists spent years studying my defects. What makes you think you understand anything about what I am?" Cole smiled, reaching into his salvaged research kit. He pulled out a data crystal, its surface etched with the Dominion's classified research markings. "Because I've spent the last 5 years stealing their research. Every failed experiment, every abandoned project." His expression hardened. "Every specimen they discarded when the results didn't match their expectations." He watched the play of emotions across her luminescent skin, disbelief, anger, hope, fear, each one more beautiful than the last. "You weren't meant to be their perfect weapon, Vailith. You were meant to be their bridge. A living link between two species they never intended to unite." She stood abruptly, and the medical equipment around them flickered as if in response. "You're wrong," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "They called me unstable. Dangerous. My emotional irregularities are exactly what they were afraid of." Cole stood too, fighting the urge to reach for her. They wanted a hybrid they could control. Instead, they created someone who could feel. Who could choose. Who could. His words cut off as Vailith doubled over, a cry of pain escaping her lips. The lights in the quarantine bay surged, then died, plunging them into darkness broken only by the ethereal glow of her skin. The colors that had been dancing beneath her surface were now racing, clashing, creating patterns that made his vision swim. "Stay back," she gasped, but Cole was already moving toward her. He'd seen enough of the Dominion's research to recognize what was happening, a cascade failure in her neural network, triggered by emotional stress. The same flaw that had led them to abandon her to the outcast colonies. But where they had seen failure, he saw something else entirely. Cole reached for her just as the bioelectric discharge burst from her skin. The shock sent him to his knees, every nerve ending screaming in protest. But he didn't let go. Couldn't let go. Because in that moment of connection, as her energy coursed through him, he saw what the Dominion scientists had missed in their obsession with control. Vailith wasn't just surviving. She was transforming. And somehow, impossibly, she was transforming him too. When the episode passed, they found themselves on the floor of the darkened bay, both breathing hard. Cole's hand was still clasped around her wrist, and where their skin met, a faint luminescence had begun to spread up his arm, a ghost of her ethereal glow. "How?" she whispered, staring at the point where their bodies connected. "This isn't possible. Human physiology can't." "Maybe," Cole said softly, watching the light pulse between them like a shared heartbeat. We need to stop letting them tell us what's possible. The colors in her skin shifted again, but this time they settled into a soft, steady radiance he hadn't seen before. It took him a moment to recognize it for what it was: peace. "They'll come for us," she said, but she didn't pull away. "When they realize what's happening, what you've discovered. Let them come." Cole tightened his grip on her hand, feeling the energy still humming between them. "I didn't cross half the galaxy and steal their darkest secrets just to walk away now." A small smile curved her lips, sending ripples of gold across her skin. "You don't even know what I am." "No," he agreed, returning her smile. "But I look forward to finding out. Together." Neither of them noticed the shadow that passed across the quarantine bay's observation window, or the urgent transmission that began its lightspeed journey to the Dominion Central Command. "Specimen V-789 has made contact. The evolution has begun." Valeth knew something was wrong with her body 3 days after the energy transfer in the quarantine bay. The changes were subtle at first, new colors flowing beneath her skin in patterns she'd never seen before, a strange warmth in her core that didn't fade, moments when her heightened senses seemed to extend beyond her physical form. But it was the dreams that truly terrified her. Dreams of crystalline forests growing beneath Varela 7's surface, of ancient structures humming with familiar energy, of DNA spirals unwinding and reforming into impossible configurations. Dreams that felt more like memories, or prophecies. She found Cole in his makeshift lab in the abandoned lower levels of the colony, surrounded by holographic displays of her genetic sequence. The luminescent trails on his arm had spread, reaching his shoulder now, giving his human skin an otherworldly sheen that matched her own. "Something's happening to me," she said without preamble. The word sent ripples of anxiety purple across her skin. "To us." Cole looked up, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. The irises that had been brown when they met now held traces of geometric patterns similar to her own. "I know," he said softly. "Look at this." He gestured to one of the displays, showing a time-lapse of cellular activity. "This was your genetic structure before our contact." The complex dance of DNA strands was familiar, the same unstable patterns she'd been shown countless times as evidence of her failure. "And this," he continued, pulling up another display, "is now." Valeth stepped closer, her scientific training asserting itself through her fear. The chaotic patterns had changed, taking on new configurations that seemed to pulse with purpose. "That's not possible," she whispered. "These structures, they're not random mutations anymore. They're deliberate," Cole finished. "Your DNA isn't just evolving, it's rewriting itself. And..." He hesitated, then pulled up a third display. "It's rewriting mine too." The hologram showed his cellular structure, and Valeth felt her knees weaken. Human DNA didn't move like that. Didn't adapt and reform with such precise intent. Unless... A sudden wave of dizziness hit her, and the lights in the lab flickered ominously. "Cole," she gasped, recognizing the onset of another episode. But this one felt different. Deeper. As if something inside her was awakening after a long sleep. He caught her as her legs gave way, and the moment their skin touched, every piece of electronic equipment in the lab surged with power. The holographic displays exploded into three-dimensional life, filling the room with spinning DNA helixes and cellular structures that began to merge and transform before their eyes. "Don't fight it," Cole murmured against her hair, holding her closer as the energy built between them. "Let it happen. I'm right here." Valeth wanted to warn him away, to protect him from whatever catastrophic failure was finally claiming her broken body. But as the power surged through her, she felt something else, a presence in her mind that wasn't her own. Wasn't Cole's either, but something older. Something that had been waiting. "You were never a failure," the presence seemed to whisper. "You were a beginning." Images flooded her consciousness, the true purpose of the hybridization program, hidden even from its creators. The ancient alien DNA they'd used hadn't come from a dying race at all, but from something far older. Something that had seeded itself throughout the galaxy, waiting for the right combination of species to awaken it. Cole, she breathed, her voice resonating with harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. I understand now. We understand. His eyes met hers, and she saw the same knowledge reflected there. The geometric patterns in his irises were complete now, matching her own. They didn't create you, he said in wonder. They found you. Hidden in their own genetic history, waiting for humanity, she finished. For the missing piece they never knew they needed. Her hand drifted to her abdomen, where the strange warmth had centered itself. Where new life was growing with impossible speed, carrying within it the culmination of an eons-old plan. The lab's systems suddenly blared with proximity alerts. On every screen, security feeds showed Dominion ships entering Varela 7's atmosphere. But more immediately concerning were the figures converging on the lab, colony security forces, their weapons charged. They know, Cole said grimly, pulling her to her feet. Someone in the colony must have reported the energy surges. The genetic changes. Valetha's skin rippled with determination, the colors shifting to deep blues and silvers she'd never manifested before. Let them come, she said, feeling the power building in her transformed cells. I'm not their failure anymore. I'm their reckoning. The lab door burst open, filling the air with the whine of charging weapons. But Valeth wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly what she was. Not a mistake. Not an aberration. A bridge between worlds. A harbinger of change. And the child growing inside her would reshape everything. Cole's hand found hers, their shared luminescence blazing like a star. Together, he asked, as both colony forces and Dominion troops closed in. Valeth smiled, feeling the ancient power surge through them both. Together. Behind them, the holographic displays showed one final image before shorting out, a DNA sequence unlike anything Earth or the Dominion had ever seen, spiraling into infinity with terrible, beautiful purpose. Evolution had found its path at last. And it would not be denied. The choice, in the end, wasn't about science or survival or even destiny. It was about love. You were never meant for bridges, Cole said, taking Valetha's hand as the crystal throne tried to claim her. You were meant to fly. Using strength born from his partial transformation, he pulled her from the throne's grasp. Before she could protest, he took her place, feeling the living crystal begin to interface with his altered DNA. Cole, no. The human DNA in you isn't a contaminant, he said, smiling as the crystal growth reached his chest. It's a gift. The capacity to love, to choose, to change, that's what they were waiting for. Not just the genetics, but the spirit. His eyes met hers. You need to remain part human, Valeth. So our child will know both sides of its heritage. So the transformation will serve life, not just evolution. Through their deepening link, he shared the truth he'd glimpsed in the ancient data. The previous species had failed because they tried to force evolution without understanding the importance of choice, of love, of remaining connected to their origins. The chamber shuddered as Dominion forces broke through the final layer above. But they were too late. Valetha's labor had begun. The child came into the world on a wave of energy that shook Varela 7 to its core. The moment it drew its first breath, every piece of crystal on the planet resonated in harmony. Through the throne's connection, Cole felt the change ripple outward, not just through the planet, but through every being touched by the ancient genetic legacy. The Dominion forces that breached the chamber found themselves transformed by proximity, their rigid genetic structures softening, awakening to new potential. The outcasts who had gathered felt their mutations stabilize, reshape themselves into something purposeful and beautiful. And at the center of it all, Valeth held their daughter, a perfect fusion of human, alien, and something entirely new. The child's skin shifted with colors that told stories in light, and her eyes held galaxies. Cole felt himself changing, becoming something that could exist between forms, between species. Not fully transformed like those who would follow, but exactly what they needed, a bridge, a translator, a living link between what was and what could be. They called me a failure, Valeth said, bringing their child to where he sat fused with the throne. The baby reached out with tiny fingers that left trails of light in the air. But they didn't understand. That failure was just another word for freedom. Cole finished, the throne's crystal receding enough to let him hold them both. The freedom to choose our own path. Above them, Varela 7's toxic atmosphere began to transform, crystals growing in impossible geometric patterns that would reshape the planet into something that could nurture this new form of life. The Dominion's empire would soon face a revolution not of weapons, but of evolution itself. Through the entire planet, a singular consciousness emerged, not to control or dominate, but to offer choice. The choice to remain as they were, or to step into a new existence where the boundaries between species, between flesh and energy, between past and future, dissolved into possibility. They called her a biological failure. But in the end, she became the mother of a new kind of success, one measured not in genetic purity or scientific achievement, but in the capacity for love to transform worlds. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other sleeping genes began to stir, waiting for their own awakening. Their own choice. Their own love story. The end.